think we are live. Give me a hello, hello in the chat if we are live, if you can see me, if you can hear me. Just adjust my microphone. Let's get the chat popped out. Let me know if you can see me. I can see Brandon in the chat, but I don't know if that's live yet. Hello, I see Maxime in the chat. Jessica, hello. Katie's here. Woohoo. Great. Lovely that we've got a few people. Anne's here. Stanley's here. Oh, good evening, everyone. So glad you could join me. I know this was a little bit of a last-minute stream after I've been gone for a few days. And Susie's here. Hello. Where's Anna? Well, actually, Anna's in the chat. I don't know. Should I let Anna explain for herself? No, I think I'll just throw Anna under the bus and say she couldn't be bothered to come and do the live stream tonight. Very lazy. Didn't really give me an excuse, just said can't be bothered. So I don't know what that was about, but no. Anna's busy this week. I'll let Anna say if she wants to why she's busy. But Anna's really busy this week, and obviously I've been gone for the last 5 days. So listen, no fault on Anna because really it's my fault for being gone for a few days. But I see even more people in the chat. Wow, I didn't think so many of you would come. Hello to Lizzie, to Matt, to Fred, to Benjamin, to Linford, to Maxisto, Brandon again, and Artanaro. Well, lovely to have you all here. As I said on Twitter and on Patreon, I took a little bit of a break from making content, from doing all that stuff. I assume my camera's blurry as all hell because for some reason my internet connection don't want to play along. So I'm just gonna get the PowerPoint up because that way you're not just looking at a blurry picture of my face. Let me see about that. Oh, lovely. There we go, that's better. But yeah, as I said on YouTube and on Patreon, not YouTube, Twitter and on Patreon, I took a break for a few days. I'm not going to go into it now again because it's all just rather me being a sad sack and none of you guys need to hear that. I see Higgy saying if we all squint, Harry looks a bit like Tom Bombadil, don't we think? I mean, I look like Rory Kinnear, who plays Tom Bombadil, in the sense that, we're both follically challenged and we're both very pale and we're both British and we've got slightly British features. Apart from that, I can't think in what other way I look like Tom Bombadil. But even more people in the chat to say hello to. Hey to D. Hisimovich, Louise, who else? Beric's here. Hello to Beric, of course, our lovely horse. Joshua's here. And Diomedes here. Wow, God, I was not expecting so many of you to come. And I'm sorry about the connection. I thought it might be better this week now that I haven't got Anna taking up all the bandwidth. Listen, I'm very new to streaming. Don't really understand why it's lagging a lot. But it is. I've got it plugged into the Ethernet. This is as good as the connection's going to get. It's probably just British Wi-Fi, British internet being terrible. So I'm sorry about that. But luckily, you're not here to look at my beautiful face. You're here to listen to me talk about the Rings of Power. Anyway, I hope you all have a drink or a snack of some kind. I've got some lovely, what is this? A Malbec. I've got a very nice Malbec. So whether your beverage is alcoholic or maybe it's a bit early in the day for you and it's non-alcoholic, or maybe you just don't drink, whatever it is, hope you've got a drink, hope you've got a snack. So as I said, the plan for today, it's a little bit of a, the plan is for a little bit of a relaxed stream. Obviously, Anna can't join me because Anna's lazy and couldn't be bothered to do today. And I skipped doing a episode 4 review this week because, as I said, I took a break from doing content. So I'm going to attempt to review, discuss, talk about episode 4 with all of you guys. Obviously, we'll go through storyline by storyline. This week's episode, we only have 3 storylines to talk about, which is, a bonus in some ways and negative in other ways. And also, and then, we'll talk about overall thoughts for the episode, can talk about things I had issues with, things you had issues with, and then at the end we can probably talk about what we're looking forward to in next week's episode. Yeah, listen, Barrick, Anna skipping out on the Bombadil episode, I know. I'm now here to be the Bombadil defender. Well, everyone's saying, oh, Lynn's got a hazy IPA, how lovely. Susie says every time watching these streams, Harry's got some wine with him. How else do you think I get through these streams? And by the way, I do this when Anna and I record when we're not streaming, so, but it's not a problem, I promise you. And Anne says, it's only Wednesday, Harry, too early in the week for a drink. Listen, if the day is ending in Y, then it is never too early for a drink. Oh dear. Stanley said, please let Anna back on soon. Listen, I'm not blocking Anna from being on. She just didn't want to be here tonight. And if you don't want to watch just me, that's fine. I completely understand. I wouldn't want to watch just me anyway. And I see people saying, oh, Anna's pranking Harry to make him talk about Bombadil on his own. Let's just remember, guys, that if you remember from our last conversation, I am actually more of a Bombadil fan than Anna is these days, because Anna's very judgmental and she only likes one version of Bombadil, and that's the one she has in her head. And we can't help Anna with that, but we do what we must. So let's talk about the episode. I feel like I've done enough waffling at the start of this. So let's talk about the episode overall. What did I think of episode 4? It's a really strange episode, I think, in that it's the episode to me that felt most like a season 1 episode. And what I mean by that is that if season 2 has been epitomized by its fast pace, by its willingness to hurry things along, by its just general desire to have the plot in every area of Middle-earth move quickly, episode 4 felt a little bit like one of those. It's not a bottle episode in the sense of traditional TV, but it did have that sense of it's almost a self-contained episode. Sauron is absent from this episode, Numenor's absent from this episode, Celebrimbor's absent from this episode, the dwarves, etc. And so, in a way, it almost feels a bit like how sometimes in season 1 it felt like we were pressing pause on the fast forward button. Now, I think people are going to have mixed views on that, whether they like that or not. I found the pace of season 2 to be very quick, and I know the more general audience has actually been a fan of that. I've seen people's reactions on Twitter. I've watched YouTube reactions to the episode, and I can see that the general audience is getting what they wanted in just a faster pace, and just more stuff happening. But I think for me as a book reader, I do prefer a slightly slower pace. So in that sense, I should be here saying this is my favorite episode. I think as we'll get on to, my issue was more that we were really dancing around the main canon plot lines in this episode, and that to me felt a little bit like, for a lot of the main story that season 2 is covering, we kind of ended up at the end of 65 minutes or whatever it was where we started. Yeah, I think Louise makes a good point here, is that there seems to be a bit of a split between people who weren't fans of the first 3 episodes really loving this one, and vice versa. I think that's just the way it goes. Something I often said in season 1 was that not every part of the show is going to be for everyone. Not every storyline is going to be for everyone. Not every character is going to be for everyone. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that's almost more just a fact of the way the show is structured, in the sense that what they're trying to do is tell this huge ensemble story with all these different characters, all these different storylines. And I think as a result, you're just going to have parts of the show that not everyone's going to love. And I think that's fine. I think that's okay. I know there are some people who like all the storylines and like all the characters equally, and I think I'm quite close to being one of those people. I'm not going to say fully. But so I don't mind it. I'll just say this episode was frustrating for me because, as you will, if you tuned into mine and Anna's live stream last week talking about the first 3 episodes, I felt the Numenor stuff was rushed in episode 3. And similarly for the Dwarvish content in the first 2 episodes, also felt that was quite rushed. And so when you get to episode 4 and there's no Numenor content, no Khazad-dûm content, and Sauron, or I should say Anatar and Celebrimbor are absent, it doesn't quite sit right with me. But it's not really a criticism of the episode per se. I think it's more a criticism of the structure of the season, and I know some of that is out of the writer's hands. Listen, some of this is even out of the showrunner's hands, because fundamentally, when Amazon Studios says you only get 8 episodes and roughly each episode's got to be an hour long, the showrunners, the writers, the directors, the editors, they all have to work within that constraint. And so, to a certain extent, I think I try not to be too harsh on that. But again, it's okay, because not every episode is going to be everyone's favourite. And I think that's fine. What I will say is this episode contains some of the strongest emotional beats for me, I thought. Particularly in the Pelagia storyline. I was really pleased with the time spent there. And we'll obviously talk about Bombadil and Rune later. But I think those of you who've seen my reactions on Twitter know that I was actually... what's the word? I was pleasantly whimsified by it, because it was just the right amount of whimsy. I'll just see what people are saying in the chat. Marco says, some parts felt like filler, some parts didn't. I didn't like it at first, but liked better after rewatches. I have to say, I felt the same, actually. It's definitely an episode which has grown on me in the second and third rewatch. So I get that. I think it's probably an episode that benefits from a rewatch or two. Lynn similarly saying missing Numenor and Celebrimbor drama. Yeah, Benjamin again saying a bit of a filler or transition episode. I think transition is the right word. I think filler's harsh, because all 3 of these storylines are main storylines in the show, whether you like that or not. It is just a fact that all 3 of these storylines are a main part of the show. So I wouldn't call it filler, but transitional is a good word for it. I think Anne said earlier it's a bit like season 1, episode 4 or 5 in that sense. Yeah, Artenaro similarly saying that the second watch was much better for them because you weren't waiting for things to happen. You were just letting it happen. You were just watching it. You were just enjoying it. Higgy Baby says, don't worry about the episode count. We'll get 2 more years after this season for another 6 episodes. Very good point. Very good point. Beric says, Pelagia has been a great surprise for me this season. Very glad to see Isildur getting some more development. No, I mean, listen, I talked about this a little bit on Twitter and I'll get onto this, but I do actually think the time in Pelagia is really well spent, and I think people are actually underrating what a smart move it is from the writers. Yeah. And Katie says, there were moments I loved, but the rest of it just didn't land for me. On the other hand, I love that there are folks getting interested in Tom Bombadil because of this. Well, there you go. Something for everyone. Right, let's get into the storylines. And I want to start with the Lindon storyline. I mean, it's not really Lindon anymore. It's Eriador towards Region. So obviously, a big part of this episode was following Galadriel and Elrond's company. Um, Following Galadriel and Elrond's company on their journey to try to get to Eregion to warn Celebrimbor. They've got however many people. Okay, here's an initial complaint I have about this storyline. Love a good D&D party. Love a good. We need a swordsman, a rogue. We need a paladin. We need a hunter. Big fan of that in TV shows. Can't get enough of it. Don't really love when TV shows just gesture at that, like at the start of this episode where Elrond's like, "Who else should we take?" And Galadriel's like, "Yes, I can recommend a swordsman and an archer. Two swordsmen and an archer." And then we don't really get to know any of them. Most of them don't get more than a line of dialogue, or if they do, it's just kind of contextual background dialogue. So I never really felt that connected with any of the side characters, and I didn't mind that as much in season 1 with Galadriel's company, because it was really for a sort of 15-minute sequence at the start. But especially here, where we started losing, where we lost one of the company, and then obviously what's his name, Callum Lynch's character Camnir, gets shot with an arrow at the end. By the time Callum Lynch got shot with the arrow, I was kind of like, oh, well, he's shot. I guess if he dies, he dies. I wasn't invested or worried in any of them. And that's not a huge complaint, because fundamentally I understand the need for red shirts, for side characters that are there to fill out the scene and to be accessories to the main characters. So I don't have a fundamental issue with that. But at the same time, I was like, it was a bit weird how they kind of came together as if they were super important, best swordsman, best archer, and then really we didn't get too much of that. Anne makes a very funny point about Galadriel being named first lieutenant in a company consisting of 6 people. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how things work in the Elvish world, but in the UK, a 6 isn't even a squad. So you would probably have a corporal at most leading it. But you know what? Something tells me that the elves don't have firm ideas of rank and subdivision of command within their military units. So, let's just let Elrond be commander and Galadriel be lieutenant for some reason. So, yeah, I think Louise makes another great point here that... do you know what, Louise? I see your point about... the horror movie trope of the black guy dying first, and I am going to bring that up, but I'll wait till I get to the Barrow White. So I actually want to talk about this first scene we got, which, by the way, I just want to say I loved this transition where we went from the map going across Eredor, and then we got the drawing on the map of the bridge, and then the camera kind of zoomed through the map and we transitioned into this shot. I thought that was really gorgeous. But going on to the actual conversation they had on the bridge, and I think this is where we probably need to talk about Elrond and Galadriel's dynamic in this episode, because I have some quite strong thoughts on this, and I was actually surprised by the reaction of people on Twitter. I mean, I kind of went off Twitter from about Friday, so I haven't seen how the discourse has progressed over the last 4 days, and maybe that's a good thing. I thought it made perfect sense for both characters. I loved that Elrond, just because he's agreed to go on this expedition with Galadriel, just because he recognizes the need to warn Celebrimbor, and he's accepted that Galadriel is going to come with him. I really liked that he hasn't, between episodes 1 and 2 and now, suddenly gone, oh well, okay, maybe I am all right with the rings, and actually all my worries about Sauron having deceived us and having some malign influence and the rings being part of his greater plan, I'm glad that hasn't gone away. I think it's a really nice touch that, much like Galadriel's character arc in season 1 was about moving from this completely blinkered, tunnel vision, one-dimensional obsession with kind of getting revenge for her family, which is all obviously driven by her grief and her loss and her trauma. And we see that slowly start to break down across season one. And so by the end of season one, we end up with Galadriel in a very different place to where she is in episode one. I think similarly with Elrond, we're going on that same journey where he's going to start at the beginning of season two with this kind of very diametrically opposed view to Galadriel about the utility of the rings and the value of the rings. But he's slowly going to work through that. And obviously, for those of us who've read the books or even seen the films, you'll know that Elrond himself gets one of the 3 rings of power at some point. So I didn't have an issue with this at all. I thought it would have been very strange, like I said, if Elrond had kind of backed down. And don't worry, guys, I will come back to the last scene where, you know, there's the whole exchange about whether Galadriel sends Elrond away to save him and his company or whether it's to save the ring. I'll get to that. But just as across the rest of the episode goes, I really liked that we set it up in this place. And from Galadriel's perspective, I loved that in this opening scene they framed her own belief in the righteousness of using the ring. And, you know, when Elrond says, well, why don't you return to Lindon? You know, if you don't want to listen to me, if you don't want to abide by my way of doing things, why don't you return to Lindon? And Galadriel says, because I do not wish to see anyone in this company die, you know, including yourself. And I think that's very telling, in that one of the things Morvith Clark talked about in the lead up to season 2 was this idea that Galadriel is moving away from being focused on stopping Sauron. While that's part of her mission now, it's also about her wanting to protect Middle-earth. And this is almost a micro, you know, expression of that macro worldview that she has. She believes that the ring and the 3 rings are crucial to protecting Elvendom, to protecting Middle-earth, to stopping Sauron. But what does that look like on a small level? On a small level, that looks like, well, using her gift of foresight to try and warn them about going through the Barrow Downs. It's about trying to warn Elrond, and we'll get to that scene later, about the sacrifices that are yet to come. So I like that with Galadriel, it's this very service-oriented approach to the ring. It's not so much about the power it offers her, it's about what she can do with it. And yes, Galadriel is still prideful, which I think is great. You know, I would not like the show if they kind of softened her pride and the hardness of her resolve. So I don't have an issue with that. And I just like that there's this back and forth between Elrond, and it's also about Elrond stepping into, you know, one of the things we realized throughout season 1 is that Elrond really doesn't know what sort of leader he wants to be, and he's not even really been a leader up until now. And so I think season 2 is just a continuation of that. I'll see what people have got to say in the chat, because I feel like I've rambled a little bit. And when I don't have Anna here, I need to, you know, take pauses. Otherwise, I feel like you guys are going to switch this off, because my voice is going to become incredibly irritating. So let's see what we've got. Beric says, is this also the first time Elrond has been in charge of a military-type excursion? His lack of experience might have also been in play here. Yeah, I think that's 100% true. I think both within the show's canon and within the book's canon, there's no real reason to expect that Elrond would have had really any sort of significant military command prior to the Siege of Eregion. Now, obviously, Tolkien just didn't write enough about it, so it's a bit of speculation, but I think you're right there. Rosie's joined the stream. Hello to Rosie. Lovely to have you here as well. Yeah, and I think Jessica's right as well when Jessica says, why not both? Galadriel is the type of person who would die for her friends, but she's also a bit opportunistic, so she can both sacrifice herself for the company in the ring. Yeah, we'll get to that bit later. Just seeing if there's anyone else Gotcha. Diomedia says, I think Elrond will inevitably become more pragmatic through everything he goes through and experiences. That's part of it too. That's definitely part of it too. You know, it is a character arc and a journey he's going on. Lowdown asks, quick fact yet, Elrond and Galadriel only interact once in the movies, right? Before the Battle of Helm's Deep through telepathy. That sounds right to me. Don't really like how Peter Jackson handles some of the Elvish stuff in the film, so... Yeah, but yeah, I think you're right. Louis says, Harry making serious points while the chat is half hair and nail stuff. Listen, I think if you guys want to talk about hair while I ramble on, that is all good by me. Okie dokie. So yeah, I love this initial scene. Really like the dynamic it's set up. Now let's talk about the Barrow White scene. I think I know Anna isn't here, and we all mourn the fact that Anna isn't here. Not. But I've got a few things to say about the Barrow White scene. Yeah, Anna said this on Twitter. For a scene that was very much built up in the promotion and marketing and interviews and built up as this horror scene, and I have to say, even Bear McCreary's track, when that was released on the album, I was really encouraged by the tone that the soundtrack was setting for this scene. What I would encourage people to do is go watch season 1. Was it episode 1 or 2? Episode 2. When you have the scene where the orc breaks into Bronwyn's house and there's the fight between Bronwyn and the orc and Theo. Now that episode was directed by J.A. Bayona. And for those of you who know about J.A. Bayona, his background is horror films. One of his best ever films is a horror film. And you could tell in those first 2 episodes that he really brought his horror credentials to that scene. And I don't want to be too critical of the way the scene was written and directed and edited, but it just didn't work as a horror scene for me. There were individual moments that worked, like when you saw just the blue eyes in the barrow itself, or when you start to hear the song very faintly in the background. That's plenty creepy. I don't hate that. And even some of the, half-attempted jump scares with the chains and people getting dragged away. It's not badly done. It's just, for those of you who love horror films, and I'm not the biggest horror aficionado, and this is where it would be helpful to have Anna if she wasn't swanning off for the evening. Because Anna's probably a much bigger horror aficionado than I am. But the way it's edited doesn't quite hold suspense long enough. It doesn't build suspense. And I think the other big issue is that this was clearly a scene that was filmed day for night, which I'm sure a lot of you will know that means. But if anyone doesn't, day for night filming is where you film a scene during the day, and then in post-production and through editing, you turn it into a nighttime scene. And you'll see that, like in this screenshot, the way you can usually tell is because it's usually kind of got this oddly bluish hue, and you'll see it in some of the rune scenes from episode 1, I think it was. And you'll also notice that the way the light plays off the skin and fabrics, it looks like how sunlight plays off skin and fabric and reflects and is absorbed. And so you can tell it's not really been filmed at night. So that's one of the issues. The other issue is, just from a visual perspective, I like that parts of it were bright enough for me to see, but at the same time, other parts weren't, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that everything is one color, and you can see it in this shot. And I could pull up more screenshots. I think I've got more coming. I'll just see if this one, yeah. So even this one with the Barrow White, like, apart from the red of the robes, everything is really kind of variants of this blue or grey. And so just in terms of from a visual perspective, your eyes aren't really being drawn to anything. And in particular, this fact that, like, if you want to make the bright blue glowing eyes stand out, you don't really want to have your background be another shade of blue and grey. So, yeah, I have a lot of issues with the scene just from the way it was put together. Um, And I think I saw someone else, yeah, Rosie said, I feel like they could have stretched out the scene more, built up more suspense. I think that's one of the issues. The scene really does race by. Um, and because of that, you're never left in that much suspense or horror. It also doesn't help when, obviously, the two main characters going through this scene are Elrond and Galadriel, so we know they're not really in any danger. Um, so I didn't find this scene, it wasn't that it was, I saw some people complain that, like, the scene was just too dark. I didn't really have that issue myself. I mean, I've got pretty good TV. I manually adjust the settings on my TV when I buy a TV anyway, because factory settings are usually rubbish. So I don't really have a problem with the darkness. It's just, it just didn't really bother me. Now, a couple of things I will say. There were a few good moments of action in there, like when Rian the archer fires the arrow and Elrond realizes that it's going to go straight through the Barrow White, and so he deflects it with his sword before it can hit. I don't even know which other elf it was, one of the other unmemorable elves. So there were individual moments of good action, but I have to be honest, when Elrond started handing out the weapons that they used to kill them, it wasn't that it was too dark. I just hadn't really registered what was going on. Like, I'd obviously seen the bit where Elrond was like, "Help me open this," and I was like, "Are they going to hide in the barrow itself? What's happening here?" And then suddenly I saw him say "here," and then you see Barrow White start getting hit with weapons. But, like, I'll be honest, the camera didn't hold enough on moments, and so I couldn't really. It's not that I couldn't follow it, it's just that I wasn't kind of on the edge of my seat. So it feels like I'm complaining a lot about this scene, but I just think it was so hyped up in the marketing and the promotion. I had pretty high expectations, and given how well the Rings of Power has done horror elements. Like, I know Anna didn't think it was that good, but I really enjoyed the scene in Shelob's cave with Isildur. It really worked well for me. And I know that a lot of work went into the scene. Obviously, they had physical actors on stage. They had, they had people who were, what were they called? Contortionists. They had contortionists playing some of the Barrow Whites, so they could contort their bodies in kind of jerky and unnatural fashion. So, like, I have a lot of respect for how the scene was put together. I just don't think the execution quite came off. And it's not the end of the world. Like, I'm talking about one scene, but it's just, to be honest, it's probably the scene in the episode I had the most issues with. So it's probably why I'm saying this. I'll just see what I've missed in the chat, because I realise I've been yapping on for a while again. Brandon says, I think we went too much with the Aragorn in the Army of the Undead type of creepy, as opposed to what Bayona did in Season 1, Episode 2, which is much more Hitchcockian in its suspense. Yeah, it's that essentially. Like, I think this kind of scene only scares you if you're a small child, and I'm not saying that in an insulting way. I'm just saying that I think if you're over a certain age, just seeing kind of creepy Barrow Whites with blue eyes and with chains and with chanting, like, if it's not edited together in a way that hits those horror beats, I think for anyone who's even a little bit kind of acclimatized to horror, I don't think it really did anything for me. People talk about night scenes, like I said, it wasn't too much of a problem for me, but I understand that, it is for some people. Lowdown says, I got Pirates of the Caribbean vibes in 2 animatronics. I didn't mind that element of it, that it felt physical. The fact that it felt like it had a physical element to it wasn't a problem. Yeah, we've talked about the design of the Barrow Whites before, so I'm not going to get into that again. Mr. Shadowfax is here. Hello to you. Lovely to see you on the stream. And said, I feel like the Barrow Whites were both overpowered and absolutely no threat at the same time. 1 second they are dragging one elf into the barrow and they're just hovering there doing nothing. Yeah, I think that's another issue. Like, like the first thing we see the Barrow Whites do is just yank an elf into the barrow and kill him, within like 3 seconds. And then for the rest of the fight, they're pretty chilled actually about fighting the elves. And I think that's one of the issues. Brandon also says, although interestingly, season 1, episode 2 was shot in small part on a soundstage with the crew flooding sunlight in through like 2 or 3 carefully chosen windows. Harder to do with the large group on screen. Yeah, listen, this is a much harder scene to shoot. I'm in no way trying to suggest this is an easy scene to get right. But this is where you have to question trying to do this sort of scene in a forest shooting day for night. Like, they set themselves a challenge, and I'm not. I wasn't wowed by it. Yeah, Louise agreeing about it being unclear on the weapons. Beric saying it was really hyped up and didn't really live up to it. Yeah, it definitely... Barrett makes a good point here. It needed the use of fire or something, actually. And this is where I go back to the color palette. When everything is this kind of bluey grey color, there's nothing that visually excites your eye or draws your eye during a fight scene. So when Galadriel was doing cool spinny moves with her sword, compare this scene with the last scene of the episode, and just from a choreography and a cinematography perspective, I was going to say night and day, but that's a bad pun. But it is worlds apart in terms of how well it comes across. I did like, where did that comment go? Higgy saying, you best start believing in white stories, Miss Galadriel. You're in one. I'm always a fan of a good Barbosa joke. Okay, I'll just see if there's any more comments we want to get across. Yeah, I agree with Louise. Was a bit of a victim of over-promotion. Yep. Okay, let's briefly touch on the thing we missed earlier. Not missed earlier, but some people brought up, which was fundamentally this issue that one of the things that I think we rightly praised the Rings of Power for when they announced their 18 new slate of cast members in December 2022, January 2023, was that they had continued their approach of taking an open and diverse approach to casting. It wasn't another 18 white guys. It was diverse, it was representative, it was a continuation of it. I think there comes an issue when, if a lot of those actors you're casting from diverse backgrounds are just going to be minimal screen time fodder, and there seems to be a hesitancy to cast canon characters beyond obviously Miriel as anyone other than white actors. Like, I do think people are allowed to say, I'm not sure that actually counts as doing much of the heavy hard work in terms of doing much in terms of diversity and representation on screen. And I think this scene, again, as other people have pointed out, I don't think it's great that if you have one black guy who's a member of the company, does he even get a speaking line before the scene? Not entirely sure. Is the first one to die, kind of playing into the terrible 80s, 90s, and early 2000s horror movie trope. It just felt like there should have been someone on set going, is this great? And I know, obviously, that when they wrote the script, they weren't like, this character, who we are going to cast as a black man, will die first. They obviously just wrote this scene and said, elf number X of the company will get dragged away. I don't believe it was intentional in that proactive sense, but I do think it was just careless. And I think as well, like, one of the funny things the Rings of Power has done is announce a certain amount of cast. They obviously announced these 18 new cast members and didn't announce a lot of the others. Like, obviously, Jack Loudon, who played original form Sauron, didn't get announced, and maybe that was because obviously the surprise around him playing original form Sauron. But it was weird the amount of cast they announced who have fundamentally not played big roles or barely been speaking roles. Now, there are some exceptions to this. I thought Nicholas Woodison as Diarmid in the first episode, very strong performance, even though he really only got 2 scenes. And obviously, we're going to see more of Selena Lowe and Callum Lynch as Rhiann and Camnir in Elrond's company. So, we're not at the end of the season. We have to wait and see how this plays out. But I'm just saying that, like, I think there might be something to think about if you're going to announce 18 cast members and get people all excited about it. Maybe have a think if you need to announce all 18 if they're not going to play a big role, or why you're announcing them 2 years out. And I think a lot of this could actually be solved by the Rings of Power stopping being so mystery or mysterious about the cast. Like beyond season 1, I don't know that we need to hide who people are playing. Like, obviously, I know people will want there to be a surprise with who's playing Celeborn in future seasons, or if they introduce someone like Glorfindel or Anarion. But if you look at the way Wheel of Time does it, which is also an Amazon Studios production, they're basing it off books. They know who the big characters are, and yet they announce who characters are playing. Like, I haven't read I've started reading the first Wheel of Time book, but I've watched both the seasons. And I think in the wait between season 1 and season 2, when they announced the cast, they also just announced who they were playing. And I think there's no reason for the Rings of Power not to do that, because it also stops, really annoying like leaks and rumors getting out of control where people spend months thinking that Callum Lynch is Celeborn or that Gavi Singh Chera is original form Sauron Anatar. So anyway, small side tangent, and I promise you guys, I know I've been a bit negative, but we're going to get on more stuff I like. Just go quickly check on the chat. Yeah, Brandon, again, talking about just the internal perspective from Amazon here, saying that it's been brought to the producer's attention and fully acknowledged the need to do better. Basically something that wasn't as obvious until the final cuts came in. Yeah, that's one of these things, again, I don't think it was intentional or malicious. It's just one of these things that, you need someone in the room just going, let's have a think about this from casting through to final edit, and let's just bear this in mind. Oh, I see Ernie's here saying Slay. Hi, Ernie. Yeah, I agree, Louise. I thought it was weird Jack Lowden never got announced. He's a brilliant actor, and I've been telling people to watch Slow Horses for like 2 years. And it would have been a great advertisement for the show, even if they hadn't revealed who he was playing. Mr. Shadowfax saying, what the F is going on with Celeborn? Don't ask me. I don't have a clue. I think it'll be season 3, though. Muse VHS asking, is episode 5 out? How much do we need to wait? 1 hour? No, it is... What time is it now? It is 8:45 my time, so that's just over 11 hours. So you got just over 11 hours until episode 5. Okay, cool. Let's move on from me not liking the Barrow Whites. Oh, and I just thought this was very funny. I've seen people memeing with it all over Twitter, but when Elrond said, according to law, it is very much like Elrond having his actually moment, bless Elrond for being such a nerd. He is lovable. Anyway, so we had that scene. And then we had the scene where Galadriel and Elrond were kind of talking. Again, this was another moment where I was like, I don't feel a connection to these characters, because you open the shot, and I don't have a screenshot of it, but you open this shot with, I think it's Rhiann, Camnir, one of the other elves, I've forgotten all the other names, clearly, crouching around this grave for their fallen comrade with the sword stuck in the ground. But it was like, I don't really know who he is. He's just dead, so I don't feel emotional about it. But what I will say is that I absolutely loved this conversation between Elrond and Galadriel, because, like I said at the start about them coming from diametrically opposed views, I thought this one was a really illustrative moment when they're standing by the lake, where Elrond is basically asking Galadriel, is there no limit to what you would use this ring to do in the pursuit of saving Middle-earth in terms of stopping Sauron? And she effectively says she hasn't found it yet. And I just think that's a really informative and telling line for each character. You know, if we think about their first age personas, Elrond is a child of he is a child that lost all his family, lost all his connection to his people, lost his home, lost everything as a result of the hubris of elves, and especially Noldrin elves. And I think Elrond inherently has a sense to him that this idea that you just keep pushing the boundaries until you find the limit is something that is always going to end in a terrible place. Whereas Galadriel, I think, sees it from that. She's obviously got a bit of that fury of the Noldor in her, but she's also, as we learn in the Silmarillion, right before, you know, the Noldor even leave Valinor, she has this pride, she has this desire to rule a land of her own. She feels the need to be someone who sets the path that others will follow, and she has that inherently in her. And so I think what we're partly seeing in this scene is just these differing worldviews. And I liked that this conversation offered both a chance to kind of soften their perspectives with each other and reach more of a middle ground, is what I would say. Yeah, I think The Age of the Rings put it perfectly here. You know, it is always important to see two disagreeing characters find common ground, even when there is a rift between them. It shows strength and humility. The Age of the Rings, I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is it. Like, I saw a lot of people on Twitter, and I was really surprised by this, like, kind of saying Elrond's way out of order, or Galadriel's not recognizing his point of view. And, like, the point is, they both have good points, and they both have reasons to be concerned about the other's viewpoint. And it's fine that they disagree, and it's fine that as an audience we should feel conflicted over each of their worldviews. And as I said when I reviewed episode 1 and 2, it was a bit like with Galadriel and Gil-galad. The relationship has changed a lot from season 1. You know, where Gil-galad wouldn't listen to her at all in season 1. In season 2, he is trying to take this more pastoral, this more fatherly, this more a king with a conscience approach, and he's still just trying to be a pragmatic king. And I think Elrond is stuck in between these two worldviews, where Galadriel is on a righteous cause almost, and Gil-galad is the ultimate pragmatist. And I think Elrond's somewhere in the middle, where he's got his own values, but he is someone who is naturally a problem solver, a pragmatist. And I just think it's really interesting. I liked it a lot. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I also like the throwback to the scene in season 1 where Celebrimbor told Elrond that Eärendil had foresaw that one day Celebrimbor's life would be in Elrond's hands. I still think it's weird from season 1 that Celebrimbor and Eärendil apparently had so many conversations and were such good friends. But it was a nice callback to season 1. It's nice to see those connective threads, which I think we always knew they were going to do, given where season 2 is headed at the end of the season. But that was nice to see. And then, of course, we got these very interesting flash forwards. And there were 4 shots, but I think there are 2 that are most interesting. Obviously, we got this shot, which is Elrond battered, bloodied, in armor, a knife being held to his throat by the orcs. And I think this is very telling. For those of you who listened to, now let's see if I can remember what episode of my own podcast it was. I want to say episode 43. I think episode 43 was my episode with Sarah Westvik, where we did a deep dive on the Siege of Eregion. So I won't go into it in too much detail here in case there are people who haven't read the books and don't know what's coming. But I think if you do know, you know how this might play out in the Siege of Eregion in terms of the book accounts, where Elrond is going to be at his lowest point during the siege, and then there is going to be a Tolkienian eucatastrophe moment. And so I think that's what we're probably hinting at here. And then the other shot, which I really liked in it, was this one of the orcs inside of a region pulling down Feanor's statue, which we haven't seen yet. And I'm still so curious, and this is going to be one of my big things for episode 5. Have they just been keeping it out of shot this whole time? Or are we actually going to get a scene where Anatar convinces Celebrimbor that we need, that actually it's right and proper to honour Feanor, even though the rest of the elves would probably be thinking, what are we doing here, erecting a statue to, the arsonist in chief? But so I'm going to be interested to see whether that just hasn't been shown on screen yet, or whether we are actually... I mean, I really hope they are going to give it an explanation on screen. But I also went back and watched the scene with... Durin and Disa, just after they've met Anatar and Celebrimbor in episode 3, and they're in this courtyard, and it's shot in such a way that they're never looking directly at where the statue would be. They're shooting towards that gate you see in the background, and so I don't know. We'll have to see. I've also seen people saying that if you look in this background of the shot, you might see a spoiler for the Siege of Eregion. So I'll just say, if you know what that is, you know what that is. I'm not going to highlight it now because I think it's people being a little bit, Yeah, listen, if you zoom in on the background of this shot you get during Galadriel's kind of glimpse forward to the battle in Eregion, if you want to see. And Marco saying, what are they going to put on the pedestal instead? Yes, no, what indeed? And I see people making lots of banner jokes in the chat, and I'm just not going to rise to it. But thank you, Anne. Anne's let me know that it is indeed episode 43 of the podcast if you want to go and listen to mine and Sarah's deep dive on the Siege of Eregion. So, yeah, we get those flash forward. We also get a shot of Sauron doing his best advert for a hair product company in his Halbrand form, which no doubt is going to be something we'll see at the end of the season when, as we've seen from the trailers, Sauron and Galadriel are going to have another showdown, so clearly he's going to go, remember how beautiful I looked with a bit of scruff and, brown hair and when I was a human. Beric saying, where do you zoom in? I can show you with my mouse, actually. I mean, God knows how bad the quality on this stream is at this point. It's not too bad on the still image. Let me go back to this. Yeah, so it is to the right of the statue. So if you kind of follow down from where the hand is on the statue and follow it in a straight line down, you'll see under this portico... you'll see some characters there, and if you zoom in on that, obviously go and get yourself a high quality screen cap, you'll see some characters there, and you may be interested to see who is there. Anyway, stop making banner jokes, Katie. I've seen your banner jokes. I'm not going to rise to it. Listen, do people just want me to talk about what's in the background, or do people want me to avoid talking about what's in the background? Because I realise that you're not going to be able to zoom in on my terrible quality stream. I'd realise the chat is like 20 seconds behind, so I'm just going to have a drink of my wine. Podcast is going to be weird. The podcast version of this episode is going to be weird because there's just no filler. Okay, people say no spoilers. All right, let's carry on. Joshua says, "Are you treating this episode by character threads or the episode chronologically?" No, by character threads. And we're almost done with the Lindon stuff, so let's carry on moving. Right, then the final scene we get, which I think is an interesting one, is this scene where we have Galadriel and Elrond and their company come across the army of orcs the army of orcs passing through Eriador, which is consistent with the books, the way they're marching. They're marching south of the Misty Mountains, coming up through Calenarthon into Eriador. So I'm pleased to see they've kept with that version of it. And then, obviously, they realise the army's already here. I did think it was a bit funny when Elrond's actually trying to do some thinking, and he's like, does this mean that Sauron's already got control of the army, or that Adar's coming to attack him, or are they at war with each other? And then, and then Galadriel's like, there is an army on Elven lands. We are all at war. And I was like, I know what you're saying, Galadriel, but also, I think Elrond's just trying to have a bit more of a brainstorm here. He's trying to work out what exactly is happening with this army, who exactly is in command. He's doing a bit of theory crafting, and and I just thought it was. I just thought it was funny that Galadriel shut that down really quickly. I did really like seeing her using Nenya to heal Camnir's wound from the stray arrow. And I did actually just like that scene in general, how random it was that he got injured because the orcs were kind of messing about and shooting at the horse. So I really liked that. I really liked that show of magic, and it was nice to see the show embrace that kind of more magical, mystical element of it. And Louis says, the way Elrond ruthlessly clamped down his hand on Camnir's mouth in the scene was quite funny. Like, sorry for your pain, dude, but shut up. Orcs about. Yeah, and Joshua says that his impression was that when Galadriel heals the wounded elf, she was surprised too. Yeah, I agree here. I don't think this was something Galadriel knew she was going to be able to do, and I really like that. Again, a lot of what we're seeing with Galadriel this season is her coming into this new power and understanding what it means, whether that's awakening her gift of foresight or this healing. So that was a cool little scene. And then we need to talk about, obviously Galadriel goes off to fight the orcs and buy them time. And Elrond says, and one of the elves says, she sacrificed herself to save us. And Elrond says, she did not do it to save us. She did it to save the ring. And I think this is probably the line that upset the most people, because they were like, come on, Elrond, she might be going to save the ring, but she is also saving you guys. She is also buying time for you guys. And regardless of what she's doing it for, she is putting herself in harm's way to do this. And so that's just me laying out the argument I've seen. Let me say, I do not agree with that interpretation. I think, again, this is a continuation of Elrond's thought that, yes, he acknowledges that Galadriel is doing a good thing, and I'm sure he accepts that she is putting herself in harm's way and, potentially sacrificing herself. But again, this goes back to Elrond and Galadriel's conversation in episode 2 in Círdan's boathouse, where Elrond is very much of the opinion that the other elves have become Sauron's collaborators because of the use of this ring. And he believes that, as with his conversation with Galadriel by the lake, this idea that there is no fixed red line you won't cross to use these rings to protect Middle-earth is just something that concerns him, and he fundamentally feels like this is not the approach they should be taking. And so I actually don't hate this at all. I actually thought it was very in character for Elrond, very appropriate for everything we've seen from him up until now. I see some people saying petty from Elrond. I don't really think it was petty. I think it was, again, I think it's an accurate reflection of where Elrond is at this point in his character arc. So yeah, I didn't have a problem with this line, and I thought it was very telling about Galadriel's own character arc that she isn't so far obsessed with the ring, and her obsession isn't really about the ring itself because she gave it to Elrond to protect. So if she was truly so attached and enamored to this ring that she couldn't do anything about it, then I don't think we would have seen Galadriel give the ring to Elrond for safekeeping. She would have just, gone on her own way because she would have believed in the power it had for her. So I actually really liked that scene, but I know it was a little bit divisive. And then we have to talk about where the Lindon storyline ended, which is, of course, everyone's favorite fool and corrupted elf, everyone's favorite father of the orcs, Mr. Hot Dad himself, or if Anna was here, I'm sure she would say, sexy, 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 hot, sexy. Just check the chat quickly. Brandon saying, in a way, it's a reverse mirror of Galadriel. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it as well. And Halifax says, thank you for this stream. Always wonderful to catch one of these, and much appreciation for all the work you're doing for the community. Oh, Halifax, that's really far too kind, but you are most welcome. See, it's funny, the chat was really quiet while I was kind of having a thoughtful moment about Elrond and Galadriel, and then as soon as Adar appeared, the chat has immediately gone, Daddy, Dadar, Adar, they made Adar even hotter, and I'm so here for it. Yeah. Oh, lights in my living room are going out. Hopefully that's okay. Anyway, so let's talk about what Adar says to her. So he says, a light shines, upon the hour of our meeting, Lady Galadriel. But people have got really hung up on the name he uses for her. And I just want to say, love to everyone who's very excited about Celeborn. Love to everyone who's very excited about Celeborn. Couldn't be me, but I'm very happy for all of you. But he doesn't call her Alatariel. He calls her Altariel. And there's a difference in this, and I'll try and explain it the best I can. So he says, Elen sila lumen omentielvo heruni Altariel, which means, star shines on the hour of our meeting, Lady Galadriel. And Alatariel is the correct Telerin. So how can I explain this without getting too lore deep and not getting myself confused? Essentially, Alatariel is the name that Celeborn gave her in Telerin, because they are Galadriel is half Noldor, half Telerin, but Celeborn is Telerin. And the language is Telerin, which is very confusing as well. So, Alatariel translates in Sindarin to Galadriel, and because we mostly use the Sindarin, or is it Sindarinized or Cinderized? I can never remember how Tolkien correctly uses that word, but because we hear the Sindarin versions of most characters' names in the books themselves, we know her as Galadriel. So Galadriel is the Sindarin version of Alatariel. But what Adar calls her is Altariel, which is the Quenya version, not of Galadriel, because remember, Galadriel is the Sindarin version of the Telerin name. Altariel is the Quenya version of the Telerin name. So the point being is that I saw people saying, oh, Adar calls her Alatariel, or the fact he's using, not her Sindarin name means he knows Celeborn, or he knows where Celeborn is, because Celeborn's the one who gives her this name. But the point is, he's using Altariel, because if you see in the subtitles, when he says, Elen sila lumen omentielvo heruni Altariel, he's speaking in Quenya. So when he's speaking in Quenya, he's not going to use Galadriel, which is a Sindarin name. He's going to use Altariel, which is the Quenya version of that name. So anyway, this is a very long and boring, I'm sure all of you are absolutely bored rotten with me kind of going on a rampage there. But anyway, the point is that just because he's calling her by the Quenya version of her Apese, which is, her name given to her by Celeborn, because obviously her names given to her by her parents were Artanis and Nerwen, and then obviously she comes to adopt Galadriel because it's given to her by her partner Celeborn. Adar this isn't a clue the show's dropping. It's just having Adar. And let's talk about why Adar speaks in Elvish to her and why Adar uses that greeting in particular. There's a big theme in Galadriel and Adar's conversation in season 1. Wait, let me just check the chat quickly to make sure I'm not boring people to tears. Louis saying, I thought I was going mad seeing people say Alatariel and Altariel because I kept picking up on the extra A and one. Yeah, you were right. Okay, Josh, Rosie, both enjoying the deep dive on the language. That's good. Halifax with a great point here. Adar coming in with Quenya just after Galadriel has claimed the lands for the elves is so powerfully ironic, especially as he is surrounded by an army of orcs. I like that interpretation. Mine is slightly different, but I'll get on to that in a second. And people saying, okay, everyone seemed to be fine about me going on a little bit of a deep dive there into the languages. Yes, Higgy makes a good point here. Now I'm brain broken going back to Finrod calling her Galadriel in the prologue. I mean, if we're honest, this is kind of the problem Tolkien makes for himself, where it's like, actually, all the elves have got about 4 names for themselves, but I'm only ever going to refer to them in the Sindarin version of it. So actually, when I'm writing out characters' dialogue of 2 elvish characters speaking to each other in the First Age in Quenya, they're actually using the wrong names for each other. So it doesn't, obviously we just have to remember that kind of the way Tolkien does his imagined storytelling, it's all coming down through the languages. But yeah, I'm not actually that fussed about about Finrod not calling her Artanis or Nerwen in the prologue. Right. So why? Let me go back to why I think Adar speaks to her in Quenya. And I know some people say it's just a cool thing the show wanted to do. And yeah, that might be it. I think the reason is that it goes back to the conversation that Adar and Galadriel had in season 1, episode 7. Sorry, I just saw Higgy's comment about actually it's pronounced Halad. Okay, let me focus. I'm getting distracted by the chat. But I'm having a good time. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I had a really rubbish last week, but I'm really enjoying this. So why is Adar using Quenya? Why is he speaking to her in Quenya? Why is he referring to her as Lady Galadriel or Heruni Altariel? I think a lot of it has to do with that season 1, episode 6 conversation where Galadriel's basically just trying to call Adar nothing but a monster, nothing but a beast, a creature of Morgoth, not worthy of life, not worthy of respect, not worthy of dignity. And in that conversation, Adar both reinforces the right of the orcs to live just as they are, but also reinforces this idea that they have the same connection to Eru Iluvatar, the one true God, as the elves do. They are not separated from God in some inherent way. And so I think this is a continuation of that, where Adar is seeing her again and is essentially saying, think about reversal of the framing. Where did they end up at the end of season 1, episode 6? Galadriel standing over Adar in chains. Now in season 2, episode 4, we have Adar standing over Galadriel. And what did he use to knock Galadriel off her horse? Chains. So I think that is so I think that's a nice parallel, but it's about flipping that power dynamic, and it's about Adar establishing himself as her equal. I think it's I think it's about that power balance. I think it's about him establishing where the respect should be. And so, I just thought it was a cool. I just thought it was a cool thing. Great way to end the episode. Lovely to have. Lovely. I mean, it is just. Elen Sila Lumen Omenti Elvo is one of Tolkien's great. I know all his language work is incredible, but talk about a great greeting to have created. I do love it. See what I missed in the chat. Oh, Brandon giving us another behind-the-scenes fact. Our team had to ask for the whole episode to be recaptioned because the first captions didn't capitalize Altariel. Well, Brandon, can I tell you, you guys still haven't fixed the... I'm pretty sure the subtitles are still wrong for season 1, episode 8, when Elrond pulls Galadriel out the water and he says to her, Aquildese, and in the subtitles it still says like Aquithese or something like that. I mean, I haven't gone back and checked in a while, but I remember for a long time the subtitles in season 1, episode 8, I'm pretty sure were wrong, unless they were using a version of Be at Peace that we haven't heard before. But I remember people complaining about that. Anyway, okay. Is there anything else I want to? Okay. Has anyone got anything else they want me to cover on Elrond and Galadriel before we move on to the next storyline? Because I realise I've been going for like an hour here, which is impressive when it's just by myself. But see what people are saying in the chat. Marco says, it was rather amusing to go from that scene to old Tom Bombadil. Do you know what it reminded me of, actually? For those of you who are big Game of Thrones fans, do you remember the episode, and I want to say it was season 3, episode 3, when a certain character loses his hand, and literally the episode ends with this character getting his hand chopped off. He's screaming into the camera, and then you hard cut to the credits, and you get a rock version of "The Bear and the Maiden Fair," which is a song from George R. R. Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire, and it's one of the best hard cuts, and that's exactly what this reminded me of, and I quite enjoyed the the discordant move. Just saying, not saying he's a particular elf from the Silm, but just putting himself on equal footing with her in that way too. Exactly. Halifax agreeing about the power balance. Lynn Ford also saying, he's calling out Galadriel in her own tongue to frame her hypocrisy and his vendetta. Halifax, but the power balance shift is underlined by everything from their position to the camera. Yeah, it's great. Like I was saying earlier, if you contrast the way the Barrow White scene was shot versus Galadriel's action scene leading into this moment, again, for me, it's night and day. Night and day. So, I don't think we have any more comments. See a few people recognizing the Bear and the Maiden Fair. Okay. Let's move on. So we are done with Lindon, and we are going on to what was my favourite storyline for the episode, and it was Pelargir. Old Numenorean settlement, as they framed it, which I just think is a funny way to frame the Pelargir storyline. And really, there's one thing we need to talk about above all else in the Pelargir storyline, and that is Isildur and Estrid. I mean, for those of you who don't know me that well, which I imagine is most of you, because if any of you do know me well, that's deeply worrying to me how you've achieved that. I love rom-coms. I absolutely love rom-coms. It is, for me, some people like reality TV. They like watching Love Island or Big Brother, or some people like watching sport. And sports is often I like to say sports is my reality TV, where I just want to switch my brain off, so I put something on, so I'll watch some football or cricket or rugby or something. But I'll tell you what is really my kind of popcorn, what is my pizza, what is my ultimate comfort, and that is a good rom-com. I see people saying my favorite storyline was Tom Bombadil. I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. But let me get there. Let me talk about these two first. I absolutely love these two. Maxim and Naya have such good on-screen chemistry. I mean, it is the most charming. I don't think I've had a romantic plot in a Tolkien film that has been more heartwarming than this. Like, obviously, Aragorn and Arwen in the films is beautiful. Faramir and Eowyn has so much weight to it and so much pathos to it. And it's probably my favorite of Tolkien's romances from the books, Faramir and Eowyn. But I don't think anyone has made me feel as wholesome and happy as these two. And listen, I know people are going to say it didn't quite work out this episode. But for those of you who are already poo-pooing the fact of these two ending up together, what you have to remember is You either haven't watched enough rom-coms or you're forgetting. We are at the pivotal point in the rom-com where things go wrong, where the other man, or in some cases it's the other woman, where the other man or other woman arrives on scene and disrupts things and throws a spanner in the wrench. But what we all know about a good rom-com is that we are eventually going to get to the good place. We are eventually going to get to our happy ending. And you cannot convince me that there is any way these two aren't ending up together at the end of the season. Don't believe you, won't be listening. I've turned off the logical part of my brain. Some of you will be saying, but Harry, what about the fiance? What about this? What about that? What about Isildur going back to Numenor? Listen, we'll get to all that. I'm just saying it's not going to be a problem. Are we going to get a love triangle, says Hickey. No, we're not going to get a love triangle. I'm going to explain this all. Don't you worry. We're not getting a love triangle. Guys, you don't need to worry about the fiance. I'm going to explain it. Right, but let's talk about some of the other fun things that happen in this episode. I mean, this scene at the start we got with Isildur finding out that Estrid was, had taken the mark of Adar, had clearly been captured, had clearly been branded. You guys are really on fire in the chat today between throw a spanner in the aqueduct. That's good, Quirky Joe. I like that a lot. Estrildor, it doesn't work as a ship name, Beric. We've got to find a better... It's one too many syllables, I think. I know it's technically, really the same syllables as, Isildur. It just doesn't work. Right, okay, anyway, let me focus. I'm going to try and be serious for a second, he says as he takes a sip of his wine. So, I saw some people saying, doesn't this make her a bad character that she hid who she was and she took the Mark of Adar and she was hiding it? But I think what we need to remember is that fundamentally what we're seeing here is a story of what people will do to survive. We've already seen what Isildur will do to survive in episode 3 when he, took the boots and the sword off the dead man. Could we imagine season 1, episode 3, Isildur, basically grave robbing? I don't think we could. We've seen what Arondir and Theo and all the others are having to do to survive. Theo was a great example of this in season 1. Halbrand, there was that great conversation in the Forge with Halbrand and Galadriel when it cut to the Southlanders pledging to Adar. A lot of what the Southlanders' story has been about is what will people do to survive and can we judge them for it? And I think that's the most interesting thing about what Isildur and Estrid's story is talking to us about. It's about Isildur understanding what it is like for the men of Middle-earth who weren't blessed with the gift of living on Numenor, weren't blessed with the Edain's long life. He's understanding what the men of Middle-earth go through, how they suffer, how they struggle, and he's learning to have sympathy for them, and in doing so, learning what it will mean to rule one day. Obviously, at this point in his story, Isildur doesn't know that he's one day going to be, the future joint king of Gondor. But it's important from a narrative perspective within the show. We allow Isildur to have these moments of trying to understand what it is that people who weren't born on this island paradise into a well-off family, father a captain in the Sea Guard, they're descended from the line of Elros, all these things that Isildur has. He's now meeting all these people who don't have any of that. Yeah, and I think Anne makes a great point here. I think people forget that the one guy who immediately did not bend the knee to Adar in episode 1 got murdered on the spot, so we can't really blame her for taking the brand. No, even if we weren't talking about this from Isildur's perspective, who amongst us wouldn't take the brand from Adar? Think about it seriously for a second. If your options are be murdered by an orc or take a brand and, work out what you're going to do after that, and maybe you've got a chance to escape or get a new start, which is clearly what Estrid did. I think we'd all pretty much knowingly do that. I don't know many people who'd be like, actually, no, let me just give up and die. At least not for me. So, I really enjoyed that scene. But of course, what we also have to talk about is what I thought was, if the Barrow White scene was short and not that fulfilling, I have to say a scene which was short and very fulfilling for me was Isildur getting caught in his bog, being a bog creature, and it was just, I will say, Maxim Baldry has got incredible comedic timing. Just the way he delivers his lines, the physical comedy he does as well. I think Maxim Baldry I think people have been sleeping on quite how good an actor he does, the range he has in particular, to go from deeply serious, heartfelt, empathetic moments to real moments of almost slapstick comedy. I think Maxim, that's been one of my, it's not a revelation for me because I already knew he was a good actor from season one, but just in these episodes 3 and 4 from season 2, I've been so impressed with Maxim, and for me, he's been he's kind of been the outsider star of season 2, at least for episodes 3 and 4. I've been really impressed with it. Obviously, as you can tell from what I said earlier, I really like what they're doing with Isildur in terms of exploring this idea of him building a connection to the land of Middle Earth and the people there. But he's such a great actor. Oh, Artenaro makes a great point. Reminded me of how I thought as a child that quicksand will become a major problem in my life. It's true, isn't it? Didn't we all as children think that quicksand at some point in our lives was going to be a real danger to us? Like, I don't know if this was a particular thing if you grew up in like the 90s, like I was born in 94. But I feel like there were a lot of children's TV shows or films that usually involved quicksand being a peril for people at some point. And then you get into your real life, and I've just turned 30, and I don't think I've ever come across quicksand, I'm going to be honest, or if I have come across quicksand, I don't remember it. It's just one of those bizarre things in life. You make a great point, Artenaro. It really does bother me. But yeah, this scene was fantastic. I liked the reference to the nameless things. Although I will say, I think when Tolkien talks about the nameless things in the deep places of this world, I thought them to be something a bit more Lovecraftian than, basically a big mudworm with pincers. I thought it was just a nice way for them to nod at the books, and it allowed Ismail to deliver that great line where he says, there are nameless things in the deep place of this world. We shall call this one supper. That was a brilliantly delivered line. And makes a good point. It wasn't just quicksand, it was the Bermuda Triangle. How often were there things about the Bermuda Triangle? Like, I think I'll probably live to like 80, 90, and I'll never come across the Bermuda Triangle. I love that the streams now just become people sharing the things, sharing things they were scared of. So for Louise in Ireland, it was the slurry pit, gross and terrifying. By the way, I don't know if there's any other British people or English people in the chat, but I don't know if anyone remembers the really terrifying, I mean, they were before my time, actually, but I've seen them. The really terrifying public safety adverts about, like, going swimming in the lake where the Grim Reaper always showed up in the background. And they were absolutely horrifying adverts that I think the government must have put out. But they were basically health and safety ones. Anyway, let's get back onto topic, because, again, even though I'm on my own, we're going an hour and 20 already. Beric says, did you see that thing's teeth? That's Lovecraftian enough. No, Beric, That's not what I want from Lovecraft. I want Lovecraft to be the thing you can't even look at because it doesn't form a contiguous shape. You want it to be made out of a color that doesn't register on the usual light spectrum. You want it to be something which exists in and out of reality. You want it to be something that, only appears at certain times of day. Like, true Lovecraftian horror is difficult. But anyway, Higgy, I'll try and find the public service announcements. They were so funny. I mean, not funny. They're genuinely terrifying for a small child. Anyway, so carrying on with Isildur. We then had that lovely fireside scene where Isildur let Estrid out of her manacles, and my favorite thing, I know I haven't got the right screenshot up for it, but my favorite thing about that was Estrid's reason for still trying to go back on Isildur. Oh, Rosie, you wanted to hear me talk about Tom Bombadil. I'm sorry you have to go. Rosie, when the VOD is uploaded, I will send you the link on Twitter and I'll put the timestamp at which I start talking about Tom Bombadil, because I appreciate I have, teased everyone with Tom Bombadil. I should have talked about him first. I'm sorry. I know that's what everyone wanted to hear, but I didn't want to talk about him. But have a good rest of your day, Rosie. But the thing I loved about this Isildur Estrid scene is that the reason she goes back on him and is going to pull the sword on him is she says, forgiveness doesn't come to people like me. You know that they'll cast me out at some point, as in the people of Pelagia will cast her out for having been a wildman, for having been one of the people that they fear and that took the mark of Adar. And I think it's a really interesting way to explore Tolkien. And I think sometimes the way Tolkien writes is a little bit problematic, but the way Tolkien talks about these divisions between different groups of the men of Middle-earth. And I think that what it demonstrates is the way the men of Middle-earth often differentiate between each other and discriminate against each other is completely pointless and bonkers. And it's based on no logic and no good reason at all. And it's just based on these ideas. It's like they say in this one, Estrid's people are quote-unquote wild men. And others... and others are the men of the wood, all this stuff. And I just think it's very Tolkienian to have the men of Middle-earth be very prejudiced against one another for no good reason in particular, which I really liked. But then we got the scene with the Ents. And I have to say, maybe one of my favorite scenes across all 2 seasons. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I genuinely think it was one of those moments where the show just said, yeah, you know how sometimes we can just strike you right in the heart and get to the core of what Tolkien was talking about, and just without needing to have this scene have plot significance in a kind of, this is going to decide the fate of Middle-earth, or this is going to, define a character's life. It was just one of those beautiful moments that allowed the show to have a moment to breathe, to have the characters connect to the natural world, to have that conversation about what it means to forgive, and what, one of my favorite moments, and I thought this was such a good bit of script writing, was when Isildur said, do you think they, as in the Ents, know what peace is? And then the Ent Snaggleroot, I think is what it was called. I don't have the names in front of me, but anyway, it was voiced by the great Jim Broadbent. Said it is what comes after the rain, and then they go into this long monologue about the natural world and the Ents' relationship to it, and it was just, I don't have anything intelligent to say about it. It was just beautiful. It was really, really beautiful, and I think it will be important for all those characters, obviously, in a long-term way. Like for Arondir, it was about finally resolving that pain and anguish he felt over cutting down that tree in season 1. For Theo, it was obviously about reconnecting with Arondir. For Isildur, it was, I think, perhaps recognizing that, when he says to Theo in episode 3 that he heard there were grander things in Middle-earth, I think the Ents are those grander things. I think that is the moment where Isildur sees the Ents. He says, "No, there are wonders outside of Numenor, and yes, I miss my home and my family, but there are wonders and grand things outside of Numenor." Um, and yeah, like Beric says there's a parallel to Tom Bombadil's description of the world before the stars, which is interesting because when we get onto that, I want to talk about what a smart use of Tolkien's own dialogue that was. Um, as other people are saying, um, and talking about the referencing of book dialogue from Fangorn Forest, Marco talking about Bear's use of music. I mean, God, Forgiveness Takes an Age. If you haven't listened to that track on the album by itself, just one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've listened to. Um, People asking, like Marco and Stanley both saying, will we see what happens to the Ent wives? Will that be something they show on screen? I think they have an option if they want to. I'm a big fan of letting certain mysteries in the source texts remain mysteries. But I think, for those of you who've read the books, you know that it's not just Sauron who, when he begins his true war on Middle-earth, begins cutting down all the forests to feed his fires for his war machinery and his industry. It's also a certain other power group, which I won't spoil for those of you who haven't read the books, but it's not just Sauron who goes on this campaign of deforestation. And so I think establishing the Ents and the Entwives in this season in particular is important because we are likely to see some of the repercussions of what happens when, unlike Arondir promising to protect the forest, there are those who aren't going to. There are those who are going to do the direct opposite. But yeah, I just thought it was a beautiful scene, and I just want to say I love the design of the Ents. There was something a little bit more, and I love the Peter Jackson Weta Workshop design of the Ents in the films, but I thought there was something even more organic in the design of these two Ents. It was almost like, rather than needing to fit that perfect human form of two arms, two legs, the torso, and the head, they allowed it to be a little bit more malleable. Um, and so I just thought that was a really nice touch to have the Ents feel like their bodies were more grown rather than kind of humanoid in that sense. Yeah. Um, okay. Let's move on. Okay, last thing on the Pelagia storyline. Okay, here's where I'm going to explain to you how we save the rom-com. Oh, look who it is! Look who's just arrived in the chat. If it isn't the traitor herself, Anna. Here I am 90 minutes later. Anna's arriving to say, "You're still going?" Yes, I am. Well, I don't have anyone to talk to, Anna, and I'm losing my voice, and I'm making do with some wine, but welcome back. Lovely to see you here. Not. Oh, by the way, Anna, you missed it earlier, but someone said, when I told them that you weren't going to be on it, they said, "Please get Anna back soon." So there are people here who just don't want to listen to me, which I really respect, actually. I respect their honesty. Shut up, Anne. I don't yap just as much. You guys are all talking back at me. Okay, let's finish off Pelagia because I want to tell you how the rom-com stays back on track. Let me explain to you why the rom-com is in no danger at all. Now, yes, we were denied a kiss on 3 separate occasions, and each time the two of them got closer, and this one in particular, they were so close. But here's what's important. When that random guy, when they're about to kiss for the final time, and then we see the guy played by Gabriel, I think it's Gabriel Akudike. Yeah, sorry, I've forgotten his last name. I apologize. But anyway, he's called Hagen or Hagen, I think it is. And he suddenly goes, "Estrid," and then runs over. Immediately, everyone in the audience is going to assume, "Oh, damn, it's her fiancé," interrupting their kiss. But do we see Hagen and Estrid kiss? No, we don't. Do we hear him called her fiancé, or my love, or anything like that? No, we don't. In fact, when we see Estrid and Hagen embrace, the camera shoots it from behind, and all we can see is them hugging. And we don't see them kissing. We don't see any expression of romantic love. And I would just like to pose the theory, and it's not actually my own theory. I have to give credit to my friend Holly, fourth Gas on Twitter, who suggested that actually it's her brother. It's a member of her family. It's not her fiance, because that's specifically why they don't show the kiss. That's why they don't say my fiance, my love. It's because Isildur is the one who's assuming it, and we are looking at this scene through Isildur's perspective. He is our point of view. So anyway, that's how the Isildur Estrid romance is still on. You don't need to worry. The rom-com is good to go. Even if he isn't her brother, I'm not worried anyway. Look at the way, go rewatch their scenes together and look at the way Estrid is looking at Isildur. Because frankly, even if her fiance is alive, and even if it is Hagen, he don't stand a chance. Look at the way Estrid is looking at Isildur, especially in this scene when she wakes up and smiles at him. We don't need to worry. Yes, as Joshua says, flashback to Return of the Jedi, Leia to Han, he's my brother. Exactly. Although, yeah, we don't need to see brother and sister kiss in this one. Anyway, so that's really the end of the Pelagia one. I'm not going to go on about the final Theo and Arondir scene. I thought it was a bit weird, the whole, you're Lord of Pelagia now, Theo saying he's got his own promises to keep. I know you can interpret away keeping the promise to his mother, keeping the promise to be a healer, to protect people, keeping the promise to Galadriel, to be a soldier and to protect people. I know you can interpret all that way. It just felt like we haven't spent enough time with Theo this season for me to be like, why is this significant? Why do we care about this? So... yes, Katie saying, just seeing Elendilmir's art of what a kiss of the scene might have looked like. Yeah, for everyone who's on Twitter rather than Instagram, Elendilmir's is Armenelos on Twitter, so if you want to see that art, it's on there. Anyway, Pelagia, absolutely great. Loved every scene of it. Loved the rom-com. Loved the end. It's probably one of my favourite scenes of the season. But I know what you're all here for, really. And it's Rune. And it's this guy. In his own words, I see you found the goat. I might need some more wine for this segment, honestly. But here we are. After 1 hour and 35 minutes, we have arrived at the man himself, the man of whimsy, Heydol Meridol Ringadongdillo. I'm just going to wait for the chat to catch up. There we are. Tom Bombadil. Goat Bombadilio. There we are. Shaking my bark, says Matt. Tommy Bombs. Yeah, I did think that was funny, Louise, that the subtitles describe him as Goat Farmer. I mean, honestly, it's as good as any way to describe him. It's nice to see the chat's excited. See, do you know why I didn't do this earlier? Because this has been the reason for you guys to all stick around through the rest of the stream. Really, I just had peak influencer content creator brain going on. And I was like, this is the only way to keep you through the whole stream, is to save Bombadil to the end. So... okay, let's talk about Tom Bombadil. All of you who are long-time followers of me, or have ever followed me on Twitter, or have ever listened to an episode of the podcast, or even broadly know my opinion on Tom Bombadil. For anyone who doesn't, because I realise there might be people here who don't follow me on Twitter, because occasionally I get people on Twitter going, what, you're a Tom Bombadil hater? Let me just explain. I think Tom Bombadil is at his most interesting when Tolkien is talking about him in his letters. Some of the most interesting things Tolkien writes about Tom Bombadil are in his letters, and I highly recommend going and reading the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, specifically the ones where Bombadil comes up, because I think Tolkien says some really interesting things. But as for the books themselves, I think any editor worth their salt should really be removing a section like Tom Bombadil. And I appreciate that a lot of people like it, and maybe I'm just not whimsical enough, and maybe I just don't enjoy music and song enough, especially when I have to read it on a page, especially when it's all rhyming nonsense. It's a bit too Jabberwocky for me. But listen, I don't like Tom Bombadil in the books. I don't find his chapters enjoyable. I find they slow the narrative pace down. I completely support Peter Jackson in cutting him from the films. I think it was one of his best decisions. To answer his question, no, I haven't read The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and I have no plans to. Much like how I haven't read The Nature of Middle-earth, I'll read that when I run out of every other letter and footnote Tolkien's wrote before I read that annoying book. So there's my position established. I don't like Tom Bombadil. But let's talk about Tom Bombadil in the TV show. And I saw some people saying he wasn't whimsy enough. He didn't sing enough. He barely hummed to himself. He didn't, he didn't speak only in riddles. He has an opinion on things. And listen, I hear what you're saying. I do hear what you're saying. And you're all right. You're all correct. This is not a faithful adaptation. This is not a literal adaptation of Tom Bombadil. And if you're sitting there going, this isn't Tom Bombadil as Tolkien described him in the books, you know what? You're right. 10 out of 10. Well done. My own hat off to you. Patrick Rothfuss thinks, Quirky Joe says, Patrick Rothfuss thinks that Bombadil is the most vital part of the books. Listen, I've read both of Patrick Rothfuss's books. I like his prose style a lot. Still think it's very funny he hasn't even managed to finish the third book, but it's very telling that someone like Patrick Rothfuss would think that Tom Bombadil is the most vital part of the books. It's very telling. Guys, one day, get me to do a stream where I drink wine and talk about my views on Patrick Rothfuss. Because I have some takes on his writing, and I like a lot of his writing. Anyway, come on. We've got to stay on topic, guys. We've got to stay on topic. So yeah, you're all right. This isn't an accurate version of Tom Bombadil. Who cares? Rory Kinnear's brilliant. I loved all his scenes. That's my real hot take. It was brilliant. It was, frankly, the best time we've spent in Rune so far. When we cut across the Harfoots, my first thought was, can't we just go back to Bombadil's house? I love Tom Bombadil. Give me another scene with Tom Bombadil. I like when he started gaslighting the stranger. Oh my god, it was so much fun. And I'll tell you another thing. Tom Bombadil, when he's standing there leaning up against the tree with his sleeves all rolled up, you know what? Tom Bombadil be looking kind of sexy. He do be looking kind of sexy. And don't tell me he doesn't, because he looks kind of good. And Rory Kinnear is brilliant. Rory Kinnear is a gift at acting. Rory Kinnear is a gift to the show in playing Tom Bombadil. Now that he's played him, I can't think of anyone else outside of maybe, what's his name from What We Do in the Shadows? He's brilliant. He's brilliant. Every line he delivered to the stranger was just phenomenal. It was a true joy. And I'll tell you, I've rewatched this episode about 4 times now. And while my favourite scene is the end scene, and while my favourite plot is Isildur and Estrid's romance, can I tell you, the scenes I enjoy watching the most, and just watching all the little acting choices that Rory Kinnear's making, are the Tom Bombadil scenes. They are. Listen, I know this sounds insane that I'm talking like this about Tom Bombadil, and I'm not going to swear, but I absolutely loved it. Like I've been restraining myself on Twitter and not going whole hog, but let me say, so good. So good. Like when he's delivered, my favorite bit is when the stranger asks him who he is when he's sitting down at his table, and then what they do, and I know we were told before the show came out that 60% of his dialogue was going to be from the books, but I wasn't expecting them to take that section where he responds to the question from Frodo and obviously they cut certain lines out, but they almost word for word give the same response, and it works so well. Like the fact that in the books he calls Frodo nameless, but it has added meaning, of course, when he says it to the stranger. It's just, it's so good. The fact he's got a lamb, and I saw people going, the show doesn't get fairy. That it's run by two Mormons. That's why he's got a lamb, because they like it. They like Jesus imagery. Can I tell you something? You might be right, but here's my counter argument. It's just fun for Tom Bombadil to have a little cute lamb he has by his fire, and it's just fun that he named the lamb after himself. It's just fun. It is whimsical. It might not be book Tom Bombadil whimsy, but it's my Tom Bombadil whimsy. And I loved when he was talking about the stars and the dismissive way he called them newcomers. I mean, I feel like for people who read The Lord of the Rings, that's just him being odd. But when you've read the Silmarillion, and when you've read the story of how the stars were first kindled by Varda, and how Tolkien writes it as this beautiful moment, and he lists off all the constellations that Varda is kindling above Cuiviénen, and then to have Bombadil go, newcomers, eh? What do they know? Think they know everything? And giving him that Cornish accent is, and I know he talked about that they settled on a Cornish accent because they wanted for something that felt old and timeless and true to the land, and I just thought it worked so well. I know I am just raving at this point, but I just absolutely, like, I'm not Bombadil pilled when it comes to the books. But god damn it, I loved it. And I'm going to be honest, I can't wait till he reappears with the stranger. I can't wait. I'm so excited for whatever the next scene is going to be. I'm even excited to see him put his blue coat on and his hat on. I don't care. Maybe he'll do some more singing. I don't care. I'm enjoying it. It's just, I know this is meant to be an analysis stream, and I'm usually meant to be quite serious, and maybe it's just because I've not been feeling great the last few days, and this has been so much fun talking with you guys tonight. But I just can't tell you how joyous I found those scenes. I loved it. And as people are saying in the chat, as Beric and Matt say in the chat, he did have a great two parts of him. He had that, when he said eldest the second time, and there's that real emphasis. And when he's talking about the land and, the fact that it's changed and all these parts where he's having this deeper connection, he's got that gravity and weight to him. But it was also just the ability, when he walks in and tells the stranger to wash his face, wash your face, wash your arms, then come out and join me by the fire. All brilliant, loved it all, literally no notes. Yeah, I'm a bit lost for words. I loved it. I really loved it. One thing I don't love, seeing as I should be a little bit balanced, is I don't love that his, end message. Let's put him in little baby Iarwain up there. Brandon says, I call the lamb Tom Bombadil to anyone internally who will listen / not fire me immediately. That's good. I like that. Tom Bombadil. Yeah, okay. Let me say the thing I didn't like. I don't like that Bombadil is the one who's met the Dark Wizard before. I don't like this whole thing that, like, the stranger is here to, face Sauron and the Dark Wizard. I don't really like the fact that Bombadil is going to be he's sort of going to be a magic teacher to him. He's going to be this kind of wise figure to teach him how to use magic. I think Anne just popped out and missed my whole loving rant about Tom Bombadil. Well, Anne, when you get a chance, watch the recording because I really lost the plot. Did I talk about Raya Yarbra's cameo as Goldberry yet? No, I haven't. But I think it was a fun little thing. This idea that she's not actually there, but her voice is still connected to Tom, because much like Tom, she's not really a physical being. She's a nature spirit, just like Tom is. And so this idea that Tom might be out in Rune, but he's still singing with Goldberry back in the Withywindle, and that sense of the kind of magical connection between them, I thought was really lovely. And of course, it allowed for the great moment. I mean, one of the best line deliveries when the stranger says, "Isn't someone with you?" and Rory Kinnear goes, "You're here with me, aren't you?" It's so well done. Brilliant. Yeah, no, Jessica, I take your point that Bombadil's not really. Well, no, he does say, because the stranger says, "Is it my task to face the face the fire? Is it my task to face Sauron?" And then Bombadil says, "It's your task to face both of them." And I'm just like, I don't care. And this goes back to the point that I do not care about this Dark Wizard. It's been 4 episodes. Rune has had the second most screen time of any of the plots, and I don't care. And I don't care about the Dark Wizard. I really don't. It's like, give me more scenes of, Tom saying, "I remember the first acorn." That's great. Danny saying, "I think Tom calling the stars newcomers kind of confirms the theory that Bombadil is basically Eru living in Middle-earth incognito." Bombadil is not Eru. Bombadil is not God. Tolkien himself basically dismisses it in one of his letters. I'm personally of the view that Bombadil's origin isn't important, but if you wanted my view, it's that very much he's a manifestation of nature. He's the living embodiment of the spirit of nature. He is this kind of pagan, spiritual embodiment of the natural world, and that's why he's been here before everything, because that's why he has this truly kind of pacifistic worldview, is because he's not an active participant in the world. He is a representation of Adar itself. I think he's much more a representation of Adar than he is of Eru. But yeah, so like, I loved all the Bombadil stuff. It's great. Can't wait for more of it. Yeah, Higgy, I like that one, that he's a personalization of the Song of the Ainur. Yeah, him being a personification of the music of creation is another great way of looking at it. I like that one too. But listen, I just loved all his lines. Rory Kinnear is great. Yeah, Diomedia says, "I've heard some complaints that his accent didn't sound very Cornish. I'm glad to hear you liked it." Listen, I think there are a lot of people who think they know what a Cornish accent is because they've seen a lot of films that like parody the Cornish accent very strongly. I think he does quite a good job of making it subtle enough. But I'll be honest, I'm obviously not from Cornwall. I'm not a native, so I couldn't tell you how accurate it is. But I thought it was pretty good. Like, when I found out he was doing a Cornish accent, I went and watched some videos on YouTube about the Cornish kind of accent and dialect and all that aspects of it, and I think he sounds pretty good. And I think Laith McPherson in general has done a pretty good job with the accent work. So, but yeah, I'm not here to judge accents. Yeah, no, I don't. Martin, I don't think Goldberry needs to be there. I think they are just connected because they are two spirits of the natural world. I think they can be singing to each other across Arda, and I think it's just a really lovely. I think it's just a lovely way of doing it. But yeah, so anyway. Lynn, I see your theory about Tom being a sort of a version of an uncorrupted Adam in the Garden of Eden. I think that would work if C.S. Lewis had written Tom Bombadil. Like, I think that's exactly how C.S. Lewis would have written Tom Bombadil. I think for Tolkien, he wouldn't have liked. I don't think he would have liked being that literal. But for your own personal interpretation, I totally get that. Quirky Joe saying, "I was thinking, I've got a brand new combine harvester." He wasn't Wurzels. Come on, he wasn't Wurzels. He wasn't the Wurzels. Let's not be harsh on Rory Kinnear. Anyway, all right, let's move on to the other thing that happened in Rune, which was the Harfoots meeting the Stores and the Suzat, the Vision of the Shire. Can I be controversial? Yeah, the stores are kind of funny and cute. Yes, did the vision of the Shire and, Nori's realization that the Harfoots have always been wandering because they were never able to find, the Shire, Suzat. Um, this particular scene where Gundabel shows Nori the drawing and tells the story of Rory Mass Burrows, I liked. It was really beautiful, and I think it's really sold by Tanya Moody's acting and by Markella Kavanagh's acting. I gotta be honest, I hated the scene with Mary Mac. Gavi Singh Chair is a fine actor and he does the comedic bit well, but I just found myself sitting there thinking, why are we spending time on this? Um, yeah, I really didn't love it. Again, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I just think we're spending a little bit too much screen time on Rune, and in particular on all this stuff. And yeah. Oh, I did see though today, for those of you who were at the stream last week when I shared an exclusive leak with you guys, that the Galdrim, the masked hunters in Rune, when I told you guys that the rumor I'd heard but hadn't been able to confirm from a source was that all their masks were VFX. I saw today that someone on Twitter had posted an interview with JD and Patrick where they revealed that the masks are in fact all done in VFX. They were all done in post production. So, shout out to my source who told me that, which I never tweeted because I didn't have a second source to collaborate it. But my God, the VFX work on those masks, incredible. Because every time I see those Galdrim on screen, they look so damn real. So really impressive VFX work. But yeah, listen, I agree with everyone saying the scene was really sweet. I agree with everyone saying how beautiful it was. It did make me very emotional. Yeah, Higgy and Matt and Jessica. Yes, all the masks were added in post production. I think it's basically because they will, whatever this curse of the flesh is they've done that, that the Galdrim spoke about in the previous episodes. I think it was probably that they couldn't find a way to do it practically that they liked, or that they decided they wanted to have more suspense. But the only thing that makes that you then have to start thinking about that is that you then now know that all of their dialogue was done in ADR. Because, like, for example, in that last episode, one of the Galdrim, the lead Galdrim says to Gundabel, says, do you know why we wear these masks? And I have to say, I don't have an empty glass, otherwise I'd do it, but it was very much Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. Like, I was expecting Gundabel to say, what will happen if you take off the mask? And then the Galdrim to go, it will be very painful. And then it's like, I think you can take it for you. If we could have got a bit of if we could have got a bit of Tom Hardy doing Bane in The Dark Knight, I would have really appreciated that with the masks. But yeah, it is. Nobody cared who I was until I put on the mask. I was born in the sand, molded by it. But yeah, anyway, enough with my bad impressions. Yeah, listen, Bruce Wayne. It's so good. I honestly think Tom Hardy's voice work is it's one of those magical things where you never know what he's gonna get, but it's just every time it cracks out. Nobody cared who I was till I put on the mask. I see you live in Rune. In fact, that's what they should have said. When the Galdrim said, by the way, editing this podcast is going to be a nightmare for me. but the bit where he said, where are the Harfoots? And she says, the only halflings in this village are stores. It was a little bit like the scene in Dark Knight Rises where Bane breaks into into Wall Street, into the stock exchange, and he says to the guy, and the guy says to him, "There's no money here," and he goes, "Really? Why are you here then?" And it was a little bit like that, and saying this is how the stream has gone over. Yeah, no, I know. The fire rises, brother. Anyway, I enjoy doing a Bane impression too much, and it's just, uh, oh, so funny. All right, yeah. No, anyway, I don't care. But in summary, I don't care about the Dark Wizard. The Stranger is obviously Gandalf. The Shire Suzat scene was beautiful, loved it, but I don't think we needed it in this episode. They could have done that at any point. I'm very glad that episode 5 is going to be Sarah on the Dark Lord saying, "Did I arrive at the part where you all are delirious?" Listen, I've been delirious for a while, but yes, yeah. Um, the fire rises. Okay. Yeah, so listen, I'm excited for episode 5. I'm excited that we're going to be getting more Eregion, more Khazad-dûm, more Numenor. It's all looking really good. Obviously, the title has been revealed for tomorrow's episode, which I've known about for a few weeks, but I haven't spoiled it because I'm a good boy. I also know what episode 6 title is, but I'm not going to spoil that either. Not an Quirky Joe says not an impression of Durin's Bane. Batman: The Dark Wizard Rises. Yeah. Yeah, so no, listen, I'm excited for episode 5. Overall, kind of my closing thought, and you guys let me know if I've missed anything about episode 4 you want me to talk about. But overall, I thought the Pelagia stuff was probably the strongest all around. The Ent scene was fantastic. Isildur, as much as I'm annoyed about them not giving Numenor enough screen time, I think if we count Isildur as an extension of Numenor, then I think the time spent on his storyline is really time well spent, given Isildur's importance both to the Numenor storyline in the next couple of seasons, but also kind of the final season. Yeah, like I said, rune stuff, mixed bag. Loved all the Bombadil stuff. Don't care for any of the Dark Wizard stuff, and just wish we'd stop pretending that there had to be something important about Gandalf's name. Um, and the Galadriel and Elrond stuff. Listen, it's got. Do you know? If for those of you who remember my reviews of season 1, I often describe the Mithril plotline as being like it's a tool to get from A to C, and it doesn't really matter what happens in B as long as you get to C. And I think that's been a little bit of what this episode has been. Oh, bye, Dimedia. We're wrapping up anyway, so you're not really gonna miss anything. But thank you so much for coming. Unless people just want me to stay for another 10 minutes and do more Bane puns into the microphone about Tolkien characters. What was I talking about? Does anyone remember what I was talking about? I've literally forgotten what I was talking about. Can someone in the chat remind me? Isildur in that plotline. Yeah, no, I think it's a good use of Isildur. Oh, Elrond and Galadriel. That's what I was talking about. Lindon. Yeah, the Elrond and Galadriel stuff. Like I can see what like I said, I didn't love the Barrow White scene. I did like the final fight scene. I love Elrond and Galadriel's dynamic, and I like where we ended that episode. I'm really interested to see how Elrond gets back to Lindon and whether there's any exciting moments in that. Obviously, I can't wait to see Galadriel and Adar reunite and have a proper conversation. Um, and kind of reverse that dynamic from season 1 episode 6. But most of all, yeah, next episode, I just can't wait to have my beloved Celebrimbor back, see more of the Anatar shenanigans, see what's happening in the halls of stone, and whatever's happening in Numenor, which I'm sure will be dramatic and tasty and very violent. Right. Anyone got any last thoughts in the chat before I close up the stream? Let's see what people have said. Lynn Ford makes a great point. It makes sense that Isildur would want to claim Ithildin as his realm if he spent meaningful time there, and it informed his character. It's a great point. Martin asks, how about Gandalf Galadriel Gil-galad seeing glimpses of the future? I have a feeling Sauron has similar visions or dreams, right? He waits for Celebrimbor like he knows he'd be let in his dream. I think, obviously, for Galadriel and Gil-galad, their gift of foresight is connected to the Three Rings. I'm not sure what it means about Gandalf, except they seem to like giving the stranger, these prophetic moments, and obviously having his whole thing about his destiny being in Rune, following the stars, then finding, Bombadil, who the Galdrim called the Hermit, and obviously Gandalf's constellation, the Hermit's hat. It's all very quirky, but I don't know that there's a deeper meaning, honestly. Louise says, Harry, I think it's bedtime. You're zoning out. It's not bedtime. I'm very bad at streaming. This is the first time I've ever done a live stream on my own. Blame Anna for not being here. I'm sorry this has been a crap stream. I know the quality's been dreadful. I'll have to really. I didn't edit the last couple of streams, but I promise I'll edit this one properly before I put it on the podcast. See what else we've got in here. Yeah, quirky jogging, A to C via whatever B might be. More Numenor, agreed, Katie. I did miss a comment. Someone asked me, who was it? Oh, little baby Grogu said, do I like to drink Guinness? I do. Better with company. Okay, yes, Louise, I'll be up at 8 a.m. watching it. I mean, I'll probably be up from 7 a.m. because I like to have a bit of time, have a morning coffee before we watch. Treehead, Matt says, both Charles and Charlie are bringing my favourite dynamics this season. The acting's been stellar. Same here. Really, really, really loved what they've done so far, and my only complaint is that we haven't had more. Anne and Mr. Shadowfax both looking forward to Numenor. Shocking. Ernie telling me to go to bed. I'm not going to. Maybe I'll have another glass of wine. Who knows? Sauron the Dark Lord asks, do you think the One Ring is going to be forged this season? No. Which disappoints me, because I would have liked if they'd kept that part of the order from the books, but I just don't think they have time. Listen, the only way the One Ring is going to be forged this season is if it's the very final scene of the season, and that's why, for the people having prophetic dreams, obviously Gandalf in particular, we keep seeing the shot of lava, and it kind of looks like the lava's in the shape of an eye. So if we do see the One Ring being forged this season, it'll literally be the very last scene in episode 8. Lynn says, thanks for the stream, Chief. We appreciate you putting up the tent poles. Have a great week. My pleasure. Beric says it's the Malbec. It's a very nice Malbec, I have to admit. RG2088 says, thank you for the great stream. I've been prepping dinner and now I've started cooking it. Didn't have time to say anything, but enjoyed listening. Well, thank you for listening. Listen, even if you haven't commented, I appreciate it. Katie saying, oh, hush, it's a lot to stream by yourself. So I've discovered. Martin, I thought it explained how Gandalf knows what happens in the future in the movies. I always find it difficult to compare stuff to the movies because Jackson takes so many liberties. Shadowfax says, Bane voice. What was I talking about? Brandon says, hope you all enjoy our 5th episode. It's technically our shortest episode of the season, but only by like a minute. Well, we'll all survive that because it'll still be around the hour mark. Right, everyone basically saying thank you. And yes, massive thank you to Brandon for sharing some behind the scenes nuggets from Amazon. Brandon's a great guy, and always a pleasure that he comes on the stream to join in. Quirky Joe saying they've got to hold some ring forging back for next season. I don't think they need to, but I think they will. I don't think they needed to, but I agree. Like, I don't think the one is going to be forged until next season. All right, guys. This has been a 2 hour and 10 minute stream. As I said at the start, I had a really crap last week. Not been having a great time of it. For those of you who don't know, it was actually my birthday on Monday. I turned 30 on Monday, so don't worry. I don't just look like old and crap for no reason. It's because I turned 30 on Monday. But yeah, haven't been having a great time of it, and I was a bit kind of anxious about doing this stream. But it's been absolutely lovely tonight. Thank you for those of you who've been here, whether it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. I really do appreciate you guys coming along. It's been great fun. Like I said, obviously these breakdowns are much better when Anna's here to join me, so hopefully next week we'll have Anna back to break down episode 5. But downside, that means the episode will be 4 hours long. Upside, it won't just be me doing Bane impressions for 2 hours. Thank you everyone for the birthday wishes. I don't really I never really celebrate my birthday. That's why, for those of you saying how did I miss your birthday? It's because I don't really celebrate it and I don't talk about it. But thank you for all the birthday wishes. Very much appreciated. And yeah, no, we'll be back. We'll be back next week. Maybe I'll do a normal podcast review of episode 5. For those of you who listen on the podcast, I will either just upload this thing in its entirety or I'll edit it down because I need to edit out the Bane impressions for the podcast version. But I'll try and get this up on the podcast feed ASAP. For those of you who aren't, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I think we're at 400 subscribers, which is amazing. But if we could hit 500 by the time the season ends, that would be lovely. So yeah, and if you want to support the podcast even more, obviously I do have a Patreon, but please don't feel obliged. There's no need to. I'm very grateful for everyone who does, but there is no obligation. But if you listen to the podcast, please, give it a like, give it a review on whichever platform you use, and most of all, just thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. This has been a really fun night for me. Probably the best night of my week so far, which is saying something. But yeah, no, thank you all. Lots of love to you all. I'm seeing all your nice messages in the chat. But yeah, no. Yeah. No, I don't really have anything else to say. I'll probably just get emotional. So thank you, everyone who came out to the stream. Love to you all. Thank you for everyone who commented, who just listened, who's been here for 5 minutes, 1 minute, an hour. Like I said, we're back next week with Anna. I hope you will all enjoy the episode tomorrow. I'll be more active on Twitter this week. And yeah, until next time, as we always say, we don't say goodbye, we don't say farewell, we say namarie. So namarie, everyone. See you back on the live stream next week.